great again. Tonight, after 11 months, our border is secure. Inflation is stopped. Wages are up. Prices are down. Our nation is strong. America is respected. And our country is back, stronger than ever before. We're poised for an economic boom, the likes of which the world has never seen. Soon we will host the World Cup and the Olympics, both of which I got. But most importantly, we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. There could be no more fitting tribute to this epic milestone than to complete the comeback of America that began just 1 year ago. When the world looks at us next year, let them see a nation that is loyal.
You just watched what may be the most brazenly audacious exercise in gaslighting American democracy has witnessed in the modern era. And here's the truly chilling thing you need to understand right now, before we go any further. Because this speech that Trump just delivered yesterday from the diplomatic reception room isn't just dishonest in the pedestrian way that politicians routinely massage statistics or spin narratives to their advantage. This is full psychological warfare waged against empirical reality itself, by a president attempting to inoculate himself against catastrophic midterm losses while literally rewriting the material conditions millions of Americans experience every single day when they open their wallets at the grocery store or check their bank accounts. What you're witnessing in this moment is the crystallization of authoritarian populism's most dangerous feature, which is the deployment of what scholars have termed metapragmatic gaslighting, the manipulation of facts mediated by deceptive commentaries on what he actually does with language, projecting a highly agentive political persona, capable of subverting implicit norms of interaction and reformulating truth itself. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, wait until you see what the fact-checkers discovered, because this is going to blow your mind completely apart. Trump claimed that the price of eggs is down 82% since March, when in reality the price of eggs is down just 43.9%, which is still significant. But notice the pathology here, because he literally doubled the actual number to manufacture a reality that doesn't exist. And this isn't a rounding error or an innocent mistake. Trump claimed he secured $18 trillion of investment into the United States, but experts say the real figure is lower by many trillions of dollars, with the White House itself listing $9.6 trillion on its website, meaning he inflated his achievement by nearly 100%. And when Bloomberg fact-checked these evolving numbers, they found he includes amorphous pledges made by trade partners that the government has little power to enforce, with many investments being vague pledges or parts of framework trade deals not yet signed. This is fiscal fiction dressed up as economic triumph. And here's where it gets absolutely explosive, because Trump stood before the nation and declared with the confidence of an emperor that inflation is stopped, that prices are down, that wages are up, offering a rapid-fire series of claims about the economic, military, and societal impact of his administration, some accurate or close to reality, while others appeared to be either misleading or wrong. Let me give you the actual data that shatters this facade completely, because for peaking in June 2022 at 9.1% annual headline inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, stood at 2.9% as of December 2024. However, the average pace of monthly inflation has increased somewhat in recent quarters, which means inflation has not stopped as Trump claims but rather continues to eat away at purchasing power, and inflation hasn't stopped. Prices which are measured by inflation rates aren't down. The most recent inflation data shows that prices increased by 3% year-over-year in September, which is not zero, and it's above the Federal Reserve's target of 2% inflation, and it's also exactly where year-over-year inflation stood when Trump took office in January. So when Trump says he inherited the worst inflation on record and fixed it, he's constructing an alternate universe because the economy has been more or less frozen for the past year, and despite Trump's claims that he inherited the worst inflation on record, Consumer Price Index numbers were at 3% when he took office and have remained steady for much of the year, with new figures released showing a modest cooling to 2.7%. This is not transformation. This is stasis masquerading as salvation, and you need to feel the rage that comes from being told your reality is a lie. And wait, because here comes the immigration bombshell that completely decimates his border security triumph narrative. Trump repeated his false claim that 25 million migrants entered the country under Biden, when the 25 million figure is false. Even Trump's previous 21 million figure was a wild exaggeration, as through December 2024, the federal government had recorded under 11 million nationwide encounters with migrants during that administration, including millions who were rapidly expelled from the country. and even adding in the so-called gotaways, estimated by House Republicans as roughly 2.2 million, there's no way the total was even close to what Trump has said. He more than doubled the number. He fabricated an invasion narrative that doesn't correspond to documented reality, and this matters profoundly, because through the creation of a crisis narrative, Trump's rhetoric relies on creating a sense of insecurity among voters that it promises to eradicate, for political gain with his absolutist rhetoric, emphasizing non-negotiable boundaries and moral outrage at their supposed violation, heavily favoring crowd reaction over veracity, with a large number of falsehoods which Trump presents as facts described as using the big lie and fire hose of falsehood, propaganda technique. Now here's where the intellectual architecture of what we're witnessing becomes truly sinister, because scholars analyzing Trump's authoritarian playbook note it's always the same process where they narrate a nation in crisis. They say that politics is war, the enemy cheats, the rules no longer apply because they've already broken them, therefore put me into power because I will break the rules for you, I will do to them what they have already done to you. This is the textbook formula, and Trump deployed every single element of it in that speech, declaring that 1 year ago our country was dead, it was ready to fail, totally fail, and now we're the hottest country in the entire world, employing what Burke called burlesque rhetoric, characterized by all-or-nothing staging with black and white terms to describe malevolent forces or coming victory. And you heard him invoke the Declaration of Independence, the World Cup, the Olympics, the 250th anniversary of American independence, as if these ceremonial markers somehow validate the fictional economic recovery he's narrating, when in fact, a wave of recent polls has shown that Americans are distressed by the cost of living and unhappy with Trump's efforts to steer the country toward prosperity, with an NPR PBS News Marist poll conducted this month, finding that 61% of respondents said the economy was not working well for them personally, compared with just 39% who said it was, and overall 70% said the cost of living, where they live, is not very affordable or not affordable at all. So you have this catastrophic disconnect where Trump is shouting that America is back and respected, and the envy of the entire globe, while the picture Trump painted contrasts with what Americans say they feel, as just 36% of Americans polled in December by NPR PBS News Marist said they approve of how he is handling the economy, and more than 1 in 3 said their personal finances had deteriorated in the past year, with consumer confidence near the lows reached when inflation was around 9% in mid-2022 under President Joe Biden. This is gaslighting on an industrial scale, and I want you to understand the intellectual genealogy of this tactic, because gaslighting is defined as an elaborate and insidious technique of deception and psychological manipulation used to undermine the victim's confidence in their own ability to distinguish truth from falsehood, right from wrong, or reality from appearance, thereby rendering them psychologically dependent on the gaslighter. And Trump uses gaslighting to make American voters doubt their memory of his past actions and positions, refute basic facts, and distrust reliable sources of information, with the ultimate aim to give himself a monopoly on truth. And here's the historical parallel that should chill your blood, because authoritarians always want to do two things. They want to change the way that people see violence, making it into something necessary and patriotic, and even morally righteous, and they want to change the way people see their targets, using dehumanizing language. And this is what the original fascists did, as Hitler started talking about Jews as parasites in 1920, so by the time he got power in 1933, Germans had been exposed to this dehumanizing rhetoric for 13 years, and Mussolini literally talked about rats, saying we need to kill rats who are bringing infectious diseases. Trump may not be using that exact dehumanizing language about vermin in this particular speech, but the structural mechanics are identical. He's creating an us versus them binary, where American greatness is predicated on the total defeat of malevolent forces and the restoration of a mythic past where everything was perfect before the corrupt establishment destroyed it. Let's talk about the wage claims, because this is where the statistical manipulation becomes almost artistic in its audacity. Trump said wages are going up much faster than inflation, but wages are outpacing inflation, though much is up for some debate, as the pace of wage growth has slowed significantly this year, as in January average wages were increasing at a pace of 4.1%, but as of when the Bureau of Labor Statistics released data, the pace had fallen to 3.5%, and inflation is currently at 3.0%, and has risen every month since April. So yes, wages are technically outpacing inflation, but the gap has narrowed dramatically, and the trajectory is moving in the wrong direction, meaning workers are not experiencing the robust purchasing power gains. Trump is advertising in stupider. Over the last 12 months, the unemployment rate among native-born workers has risen from 3.9% in November 2024 under Biden to 4.3% last month under Trump. Employment conditions are deteriorating, not improving, but Trump waves charts around like totems of economic resurrection, while the material reality for working families remains stubbornly difficult. Now I need you to understand why this speech happened at this precise moment, because though he's recently mocked Democrats' focus on affordability, their focus on pocketbook issues is seen as why they swept key off-year elections in November, which means Trump is hemorrhaging political capital on the one issue he campaigned on relentlessly, which was making America affordable again, and Trump, who ran his 2024 campaign on promising to lower prices on day one, finds this is a lethal problem as the president's broken pledge explains why so much of the country is now even more upset than they were when Biden was in office, because it's worse when someone promises you to your face that they'll fix that problem and then tell you they've done it when they haven't, and that's where Trump is today. He's trapped in a nightmare of his own making, where his signature promise lies in ruins around him, so he does what authoritarians always do. When reality refuses to cooperate, he manufactures a counter-reality and broadcasts it with maximum confidence, betting that repetition and spectacle will override empirical truth. And let me show you the salon analysis that cuts to the bone, because the economy has been more or less frozen for the past year, and the job market is cooling substantially, with new statistics showing that unemployment stands at 4.6%, the highest number since the 2022 peak, and with the exception of the stock market riding the sugar high of the artificial intelligence bubble, the economy has been more or less frozen, and despite Trump's declarations that his tariffs have been the country's salvation, his erratic actions have made it impossible to anticipate beyond the next week, while consumers are seeing spikes in commodities like beef and coffee, even as the president and his people insist everything is getting cheaper, yet another false claim. So grocery prices are rising, not falling. Unemployment is climbing, not descending. Inflation persists stubbornly above target, and Trump stands before the nation proclaiming mission accomplished in an address that had the feel of a Trump rally speech, without the rally, as unlike the often sedate primetime addresses of past presidents, Trump spoke loudly throughout his speech, at times seeming to shout. This is not presidential communication. This is authoritarian performance art, and the pattern coalesces into a hybrid style of politics termed authoritarian populism, which didn't fit neatly into pre-existing academic boxes, as authoritarian practices were occurring in mostly democratic states. Trump exemplifies this perfectly because he operates within democratic structures while systematically undermining democratic norms. Populism occurs when leaders rhetorically divide the population into two groups, the majority versus the elites, and these leaders position themselves as the true representatives of the majority group, and this anti-establishment us versus them struggle is at the center of populist rhetoric. But Trump takes it further by adding the strongman persona. The nationalist and populist themes dominate the rhetoric of President Trump and link to a persona that has evolved from celebrity outsider to presidential strongman, and the nationalist populism and strongman persona in turn demands a vernacular rhetorical style, unlike any previous modern president. A style that makes no attempt to lay out a case, requires constant lies, and breaks every norm for how a presidential candidate or president should talk. Think about what he's actually doing in functional terms, because when Trump says the border is secure, he's not making an argument subject to verification. He's issuing a declaration that demands submission, and Trump's message is well designed to appeal to voters with an authoritarian personality, structure, especially in the white working class who feel threatened by the pace of societal change, especially demographic change, and his ceremonial speeches violate norms, calling for a message of national unity, and instead present a divisive message designed to create strongly negative emotions, especially fear and hate. This speech checking every box, the invocation of national restoration, the framing of opposition as treasonous destruction, the grandiose claims unsupported by data, the promise that only he can fix what's broken, all of it calibrated to activate authoritarian psychological predispositions in his base, while attempting to bludgeon everyone else into accepting his version of events through sheer force of repetition. The intellectual dishonesty becomes almost metaphysical when you consider that the remark came as the nation is preparing to settle down to celebrate the holidays. Yet Trump was focused more on divisions within the country than a sense of unity, and his speech was a rehash of his recent messaging that has so far been unable to calm public anxiety about the cost of groceries, housing, utilities, and other basic goods. He had an opportunity to genuinely address American concerns, to acknowledge the persistent affordability crisis, to offer concrete policies beyond vague promises of housing reform coming next year, but instead he chose triumphalism. He chose to gaslight 70% of Americans who say they're struggling with the cost of living, and tell them they're wrong about their own lives. This is contempt masquerading as leadership, and I need to emphasize this point about the broader threat to democratic epistemology because Trump and his administration have engaged in a relentless campaign to manipulate public perception, distort reality, and sow division, and these tactics are not merely rhetorical. They are calculated strategies that undermine democratic institutions, disorient the public, and consolidate authoritarian control. When a president can stand before the nation and claim inflation has stopped when it demonstrably hasn't, when he can inflate investment figures by nearly 100%, when he can fabricate immigration statistics and face no immediate accountability, he's not just lying about policy, he's attacking the very possibility of shared truth that makes democratic deliberation possible. By defunding programs targeting research and restricting data collection, the administration gaslights the public into believing that data is partisan and expertise is suspect, and these actions disorient the public and consolidate narrative control by dismantling the very tools that expose inequity and demand accountability. This is why Trump's false claim that he's bringing prices down fast matters so profoundly, because grocery prices aren't falling rapidly, as even if he was talking specifically about grocery prices, they're up this year, and Consumer Price Index data shows that a far greater number of grocery items have increased in price since he returned to office than have decreased, with the most recent available figures showing that average grocery prices were up about 2.7% from September 2024, about 1.4% from January 2025, the month Trump returned to office. Every single data point contradicts his narrative, yet he persists because Trump is employing a psychological strategy called Darvo deny attack and reverse victim and offender, which is used to dodge accountability by shifting blame, silencing critics, and reframing oneself as victim. He denies the economic reality Americans experience. He attacks those who question his rosy picture, calling them panic mongers and enemies, and he reverses the narrative, claiming he's the victim of unfair media coverage, while positioning himself as the heroic rescuer of American prosperity. The comparison to prior administrations reveals the magnitude of this deception, because the truth of the matter was that the Biden administration had done an admirable job of engineering what economists call a soft landing, by taming inflation quickly, without driving the economy into recession, with an analysis of the final numbers, showing a resilient economy that still faced some challenges, but was overall on the road to recovery. Trump inherited an economy already stabilizing, inflation already declining, unemployment relatively low, yet he campaigns and governs as if he personally rescued America from apocalypse, when the year-over-year U.S. inflation rate hit about a 40-year high during the Biden administration in June 2022 at 9.1%, but even that was not close to the all-time record, and it occurred more than 2 years before Trump returned, with inflation having plummeted before Trump's inauguration. And think about the utter cynicism embedded in Trump announcing a warrior dividend of $1,776 for military members in this speech, because Trump, in an 18-minute address from the White House, rolled out no new proposals apart from what he called a warrior dividend that will go to nearly 1.5 million military service members in honor of the nation's founding almost 250 years ago, saying the checks are already on the way, and no one understood that one until about 30 minutes ago. We made a lot more money than anyone thought, because of tariffs. This is bribery dressed as patriotism, a transparent attempt to buy military loyalty while claiming tariff revenues pay for it, when economists consistently warn that 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists have warned that Trump's promised tariff policies will increase inflation, meaning the very mechanism Trump celebrates as funding generosity is actually a regressive tax on American consumers that will make everything more expensive. It's a shell game where working families pay higher prices so Trump can distribute checks and claim credit. The performative nationalism Trump deploys throughout this address connects to a broader authoritarian project, because Trump's rhetoric has its roots in a populist political method that suggests nationalistic answers to political, economic, and social problems, and it employs absolutist framings and threat narratives characterized by a rejection of the political establishment. When he invokes the World Cup, the Olympics, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, he's not celebrating shared civic achievements. He's claiming personal credit for events he didn't create, while wrapping himself in the flag to deflect scrutiny of his actual record. Trump's rhetoric emphasizes themes of crisis, division, and loyalty, often casting himself as an outsider, fighting against a corrupt political establishment, with central emotional appeals that resonate with voter insecurity, promises of restoring past national greatness, and the use of simple, repetitive language that amplifies his message to broad audiences. And Trump's rhetoric often frames complex issues in binary terms, using absolutes such as always and never to express uncompromising stances. So when Trump declares that after 11 months our border is secure, inflation is stopped, wages are up, prices are down, our nation is strong, America is respected, and our country is back, he's not presenting arguments, he's incanting mantras. He's performing a ritual of nationalist restoration that bypasses rational evaluation entirely and appeals directly to authoritarian psychology. This is why an authoritarian predisposition chronically inclines individuals to hold and express negative attitudes towards outgroups that seem to threaten collective security and to support attitudes and behaviors that enhance sameness and minimize diversity. And in constructing his crisis, Trump tapped into rhetoric linked to both antagonism towards outgroups and amity towards the in-group, directly targeting authoritarian voters' psychological predispositions, and Trump succeeded, as in the 2016 election. Authoritarian inclinations were a key predictor of Trump support, while heightened perceptions of fear and crisis most significantly affect the political behavior of non-authoritarians, since such perceptions shift non-authoritarians away from their usual electoral preferences and towards nationalist strongmen. The stakes could not be higher because we're watching in real time the consolidation of an authoritarian political style that operates by manufacturing crisis, promising salvation, and demanding loyalty rather than accountability. In stark contrast, our most effective presidents have used rhetoric to present a positive vision of what the nation could achieve, as the three most effective presidential uses of rhetoric in the past century. FDR, Reagan, and Obama all presented a coherent ideological message that, while focused on problems of the moment, was also rooted in a fundamental optimism. Trump offers nothing but carnage and rescue, darkness and his personal light, failure and his singular ability to fix it. This is the rhetoric of the strongman, not the democratic leader. And as we move toward the 2026 midterms, you need to understand that the economy looms as the central issue in the midterm elections, and as the new year approaches, Trump is eager to stave off the congressional losses that typically bedevil presidents, with some Republicans urging him to focus more on pocketbook issues as opposed to foreign affairs and cultural issues that often pique Trump's interest. This speech represents his answer. Double down on the lie, claim victory regardless of facts, weaponize nationalist symbolism, and hope that repetition overpowers reality. It's a dangerous gambit that depends on Americans doubting their own experiences, distrusting independent verification, and accepting Trump's word as gospel even when grocery receipts and bank statements tell a different story. The greatest tragedy here isn't just Trump's dishonesty, which is routine and expected, it's the systematic erosion of our collective capacity to adjudicate truth claims, to hold leaders accountable to verifiable facts, to maintain the epistemic infrastructure that democracy requires to function. When low-information voters were courted by Trump aggressively to great effect with gaslighting, lies, and disinformation as a tactic of the Republican Party for years, but Trump and his team taking this to new levels, and certainly the case can be made that if low-information voters had truly been voting for a better economy and their own self-interests, they would have cast their ballots for Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump, but instead it was Trump's messaging that prevailed. We're living through a crisis of democratic epistemology, where the most powerful person in the country can fabricate an alternate economic reality and face no immediate consequences because enough people either believe him or have abandoned the belief that truth matters at all. So when you watch Trump declare that America is back stronger than ever before, while 70% of Americans say they can't afford their lives, when you hear him claim inflation is stopped while prices keep rising, when he inflates his achievements by trillions of dollars and fabricates immigration statistics, understand that you're not witnessing normal political spin, you're witnessing authoritarian gaslighting deployed at the highest levels of American government, and the fight ahead isn't just about policy disagreements or partisan preferences. It's about whether we can maintain a shared reality based on verifiable facts, or whether we descend fully into a post-truth dystopia where power alone determines what counts as true. This speech was a declaration of war on empirical reality itself, and every single person who cares about democracy needs to recognize it as such and respond with the moral urgency this moment demands, because the alternative is accepting our own subjugation to a manufactured reality that serves only the interests of an authoritarian leader and his enablers. The data doesn't lie even when the president does, and we cannot let exhaustion or cynicism prevent us from insisting loudly and relentlessly that facts still matter, that truth still exists, and that American democracy depends on our collective refusal to accept gaslighting as governance.